What's up, everybody? It doesn't happen that often, but today I've got a beautiful bishop puzzle for you guys. Take a look at the board here. It's white's turn to move and win the game. Now, the tricky thing about this puzzle is that the king is stuck right here on the g8 square, and we definitely have to find a way to kick him out of there. We got to find a way to promote one of our pawns, and we got to do all of that while avoiding a potential stalemate. So, you guys up for the challenge? Now, looking at this position right here, I think the most intuitive move would be king to c2, because it brings your king a little bit closer to the action. But unfortunately, if we play that move, we're just going to blunder and allow black to draw the game. How so? By playing pawn to e5. Now with that move, white essentially loses all chances of winning. If we continue with king to d3, black is going to push this a pawn, and now he's 2 squares away from promotion, which is a big problem. So we need to address that immediately. The good part is we can stop the pawn either with the king or with the bishop. The bad part is that the best result here is going to be a draw. Now let's see, if we decide to stop it with the king, after we capture the newly promoted queen, black is going to push his other pawn, and he's gladly going to sacrifice it to achieve a draw. And you're going to have no other option but to take it. See, okay, not our best option. Now let's see if you decide to stop it with the bishop next. Now in this position, you can't play bishop to a1 to stop the pawn from promoting because black is just going to remain without any legal moves. But what if instead of trying to advance the king, you try and block the a pawn, forcing black to move the e pawn? Unfortunately, this is not going to work either because your king is just too far away to defend his pawns if white ever decides to move the bishop from that diagonal. And in this situation, he's honestly going to need to. So the king moves to b3, move to a2. King to c4, black promotes. We take, black pawn to e3, move king to d5, black to e2, and bishop to c3 to stop the promotion. Now, as I said, the white king is still too far away to stop black from taking his pawns. So the king to c2 is not the answer. But what about king to a2? Well, sadly, this is not the answer we're looking for either. Black is still going to push the a pawn, we capture, and black is going to play pawn to e3, forcing you to take it sooner or later. Even if you're thinking about taking the pawn when it promotes on e1, unfortunately, this delay is not going to do you any good because your king is still too far away to protect his own pawns. Now, as I said, after pawn to e2, we're forced to play bishop to c3. Black promotes, we capture, and black is going to be able to take both of our pawns. Now, king to b2 is more or less the same variation, with the king not being able to arrive in time to defend his pawns. Now, if you're thinking bishop to a1 now, after exhausting all of our other options, then congratulations, this move is also going to draw the game. But you were on the right track. Now, bishop to a1 is a draw because black can play pawn to e3, interfering with the bishop's defense over the g7 pawn. And if you make a random move, black is going to be able to capture both of your pawns. Alright, so in this position, you are forced to take the pawn, and we already saw a similar scenario where black sacrificed his pawn to achieve the draw. So, what's the correct answer? How should we tackle these kinds of situations in the future? Well, first let's try to reverse engineer it a little bit. To win this, we need our king to be on f5 so that it can defend its pawn. Now we also need a way to allow the black king to move from that g8 square, and the only way to do that is to allow him to capture the g7 pawn. But the tricky part now is that we need to allow him to capture the g pawn only when our king can arrive on either f5 or g5 on the next turn. Now if not, black is going to be able to capture the other pawn as well. So now, knowing all of this, we can finally determine that the winning move in this position is the brilliant bishop to e5. Now black is forced to play pawn to e3, and now we're just not going to go ahead and capture that pawn, but instead we're going to bring our king up the board toward our own pawns. Black is forced once again to move to a2, and now what is white going to do? Are we scared of the pawn promoting and we play bishop to a1? If so, we're going to lose all the advantage we just gained once again. Black is now forced to move the e pawn, king moves to d3, pawn to e4, and if we capture, it's a stalemate. Now, if we move to e3, it's a stalemate again, and if we try to go around with king to d4, this move would block the bishop's defense over the g pawn and allow black to capture it. So in this position, we have to completely disregard the promotion threat and move to d3. Our sole goal now is to arrive with our king right here on the f5 square. Black promotes, we capture, and now black is forced to play e5. And be careful here, because the only winning move is going to be king to e4. Now the only legal move for black is to capture our pawn, and he can do that because his pawn blocked the bishop's path. And as we planned, we allowed the black king to take our pawn when we arrived on the f5 square. Now black is once again forced to move his king because the pawn is pinned. And after we take the pawn, it's really going to be an easy win for us. Alright, so maybe instead of that, he's going to try and move to h8. In which case, white would capture, black king moves to g8, we move our king to e6, king to f8, which is the only move for black in that scenario. So we move our pawn to g7. He moves king to g8, and because of the bishop, white is able to make a waiting move, forcing black to move to h7. And after that, king to f7 secures the promotion, and then queen to g5 secures that win. Now, if he goes to f8 or g8 instead, the winning pattern is pretty similar. White takes the pawn, moves to e6, and forces black out of there with a bishop move. Alright, that's it for today's puzzle. I really hope you liked this one and found it challenging. If you've been enjoying our content so far, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. See if they can get the puzzles faster than you. We'll see you in the next one.